Good evening, everyone. If we could get started, I realize that people are still coming in, but we'd like to start on time. First of all, I am really quite overwhelmed by the number of people that are here tonight. So really, thank you for being here, and thank you for really the beautiful energy and spirit that I see here already. So thank you so much for coming. I also have to point out that we planned this event really actually before COVID. So Father Greg Boyle, let's see if I got this right, he was coming in the fall of 2020, he was coming in the spring of 2021, and here we now, where are we now? In the fall of 2021. So we kept on postponing because of this COVID situation. And I'll tell you, these guys were worth waiting for. Thank God that we're here. It's great to see the energy and to see us in person. I am thrilled that we're not Zooming this, that we're actually here together. So you're happy about that too, right? Speaking of which, this event is also being streamed. So I know that there are some people out there in cyberspace. So those in cyberspace, we welcome you as well. And just before we get started, a few quick housekeeping things. How many of you are here visiting the campus tonight? Okay, quite a few. Great. Visitors, if you could please, in the back, there's a table with a little form, and if you fill this out, we'll send you a check. No, I'm only kidding. It's really to put you on our mailing list, but these little forms are on the back there. Also, there is a booklet on the back explaining our chapel. It gives this, for those of you who have never been in this chapel, it's really the gem of the campus community, and this little booklet explains everything that's in the chapel. You'll notice to the right, these beautiful tapestries that were just installed several weeks ago. One of our faculty, who is an artist, did all of these, and tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, we're going to have the blessing of these new tapestries. So you might want to come back for that as well. Finally, just by way of housekeeping, I am a Father Greg Boyle groupie. He has 3 books, right? His earliest book is Tattoos on the Heart. If you haven't read the book, believe me, it is absolutely beautiful. It's one of the best books, right, Michelle? One of the best books I've ever read, right? But that said, this is the first time I have one up on Dr. Loris. She did not read the second one, Barking to the Choir, right? Also a great book. Now, that said, yesterday, Father Greg's new book was released, and this is really his book launching celebration here at Sacred Heart University because we are pioneers, right? And so this book, which is in the narthex of the chapel, is called The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness. So Father Greg will be available following his presentation in the narthex to sign books. Also, in the narthex, there will be apple cider, and what's that other thing again? Some kind of, strudel, yeah. So, I never read this stuff, that's right. So apple cider and strudel in the narthex of the chapel. Am I forgetting anything? No, I don't think so. Okay. Just a brief word of introduction, and Father Greg Boyle and Yarin and Frank will really give the whole explanation in terms of who they are and what their work is. I'm going to depart from what I prepared because I was just so moved by the 3 of you. And we had a little special pizza party before this in terms of your talk. And there's just 2 things that I would share is this. That's so much about the heart of this university. Pope Francis tells us that the church should be a field hospital. I don't know if you've heard this before. A field hospital, a place where everyone is really welcomed. And certainly what Father Greg Boyle has done with Homeboys has created a field hospital out in Los Angeles that's really an example for the entire world. Pope Francis also says that we should have the smell of the sheep. And you guys certainly have the smell of the sheep. And one last comment, because you don't want to listen to me. On their webpage, there's this phrase, gang violence is about a lethal absence of hope. Gang violence is about a lethal absence of hope. So, what I want to say, Pope Francis also says in Laudato Si, all it takes is one person to restore hope in our world. Father Greg and Yarin and Frank, you have restored hope. And we just thank you for your ministry. We thank you for who you are. And most importantly, we thank you for coming to be here with us this evening. So we're going to do this a little bit differently. Yarin and Frank, who are homeboys that traveled here with Father Greg, right? You're going to introduce Father Greg, right? And then Father Greg will take it from there. We will end at 8 o'clock, and at the end of Father Greg's presentation, there will be some time for Q&A, if there's time left. Okay, you guys ready? Take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. So many people. First of all, thank you for having us here. And so my name is Yarin. I was born and raised in East Los Angeles. I have been in and out of jail since I was 14 years old. Went to juvenile hall, ended up graduating to county jail, and then mastering in prison. So I've been in this cycle for many years. I joined my neighborhood when I was adolescent. I've been through many stuff. I got shot. I got shot 9 times in total, so different times, and I just been like through so much stuff, jail, violence, all this stuff. So this last time that I got arrested last year on a gun charge, and it's so crazy because like I was talking to somebody earlier, and it's like destiny, right? So this whole in Los Angeles, they had a new district attorney, and I was supposed to do 5 years. They ended up giving me a county lid, so I only did 3 months out of that, and I got out in March, and I still was like so lost, like I didn't know what to do. I was still in that gang life, and something told me like, go to Homeboys. I had heard about Homeboys a lot, and in prison, from different people in the street. I would see it like on Facebook or stuff like that. And I went and I was like, I'm gonna go to Homeboys. So I went and I talked to Father Greg, and he gave me an opportunity, and he gave me a job. So I started working in maintenance, but I didn't even know what Homeboys was about. Like I didn't know what the place was. So I started working in maintenance, and I didn't really talk to anybody because I had like a lot of enemies there, but I didn't know that in reality they weren't my enemies. They're my friends now. So I started off doing the maintenance and the education, and I got back into school. My boss, which she's my boss now, she told me like, go back to college. So I went back to college, and I was doing really good. She hired me because the same work that she does, I knew how to do it. So basically, we just enroll students into the college that they want to go to. We do their financial aid. We get them hooked up in their programs. Mostly everybody is formerly incarcerated, so there's all these formerly incarcerated groups in every campus now in California, so that's amazing. So I work with all these different campuses, and so it's really an honor to be here at a university in Connecticut. So, but as I was making this transition, I redirected my life, meeting new people. I ended up getting shot again in June, and I got shot 3 times this time, and I got really lucky because one of the bullets almost hit my spine, really close, like super close. And that kind of like put me in a situation where I'm like, fuck, man, like, excuse my language. The first thing that came into my head was, I'm gonna go get a gun. I need to go. I knew the people that shot me. I knew who they were. I knew where they were at. But when I got out of the hospital, I got out of the hospital in 2 days, and I went straight to work. And everybody like, what are you doing here at work? Like, go home. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to go home. Like, I'd rather be here because I know if I would have gone home, I wouldn't not have gone home. I would have done something dumb. And so everybody just like really held on to me, embraced me, told me like, it's gonna be okay. So at that time, I made a decision in my life, like, am I gonna continue this cycle? Am I gonna continue this violence? Or am I gonna continue the journey that I'm doing and becoming the man that I wanna be? So it was a very hard decision. It really hurt my pride. It really hurt my ego. But I was tired of that already too. So I didn't want to continue that, and I just kept focusing on what I'm doing. And it's so amazing that Homeboy's like, if it weren't for them, I would have, who knows where I would have been at right now. So that's what Homeboy does. It gives you like, just redirects your life in a different way. I feel like a new man. I feel happy for once. I feel not stressed out about all this stuff that's going on. And I just want to thank Father Greg for all everything he does, everything. He's such an amazing man. And everybody at Homeboys too, everybody there is like, man, it's just crazy. My boss, she's the best. Like, oh man, I love her. Brittany, I love you, Brittany. Laura, the whole education department is, yeah. And that's a little bit about what Homeboy has done for me. And thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Frank Vargas. I would like to start off by saying thanks to everybody for being here with us tonight. Let me give you a brief story of me. I was born to a single parent. My mother was the one that raised us. I had my father, but he left us when I was about 1 year old, and I would see him on the weekends and stuff like that. So I had the chance to see what a father was until the age around 10, 11. He walked out pretty much completely. He stopped picking me up on the weekends because that was the agreement between my mom and my dad. And that will end up playing a big role key towards my future. After my father left me, I was pretty devastated. I was, I guess, mad, looking for acceptance or something. So I ended up turning to the streets. By me turning to the streets, it totally changed my life in a negative way. I started getting incarcerated at a very young age. I think it was maybe like 13. I've been to juvenile hall, I've been to camps, I've been to placements, and so that led for me to have a juvenile. I've spent most of my juvenile life in the system, and but one thing I always kept in mind, and I saw that education could play a big part. So I always stayed in school, and it's funny because I made my mind up when I was around high school. I want to say like in the 11th grade that I wanted to join the military. So by me doing that, I was thinking that was going to be my escape plan. How could I get away from all this negativity? And it was the end of my 11th grade when I was walking home, and I was approached by some rival gang members, and I was actually shot. I was shot in my neck. It broke my neck. It broke C5 and C6, which caused me to become paralyzed from my body. The doctors told my mom that I would no longer be able to walk, so they pretty much gave you like the worstest. They told you the worstest thing that was gonna happen to me, and after a year of physical therapy and all this, I had to learn how to walk, I had to learn how to talk, I had to learn how to eat again, I had to learn everything like as if I was a little kid, and still after that traumatic experience, I still didn't learn. I was still mad. I was still having so much hatred. I was confused. And I continued my life in a bad, negative way instead of just saying, like, man, I just survived this. I should look forward to a better life. But I felt like I pretty much didn't have nothing to live for. So I continued it. And as I became an adult, I also graduated, like how you said, I graduated to the county. I ended up catching a prison term. When I caught my prison term, I had a daughter. She was like roughly the age of, I want to say 5. And that's when my life like sparked something in it, because it was so hard to see your daughter come and visit you and cry every time she's about to leave, telling you like, oh, Dad, I don't want you to leave. So that sparked something in me. And I met Father Greg when I was a juvenile in a camp. And I remember that he had given us his card. He gave us his card. And he told me that one day I will be tired of this and that there's a better life for me. I just don't know yet. And when I'm ready, that Homeboys will have his doors open for me. And I always kept that in mind. And then as I was in prison, I stopped and I sat in my cell, which was a 12-by-6, horrible. You were locked down most of the day. You wouldn't really come out, see sun. And I told myself, like, what do I really want? What do I want in life? Do I really want to continue that life? Do I want to end up like most of my friends were either in prison or they were pretty much dead? So when I got out, I went to Homeboys Industry. And once you walk into the building, the first office that you see is Father Greg's office, and I saw that he was there. So I sat down and I had a conversation, and I told him that I was tired. I wanted to change my life around, but I didn't know how. I didn't have the skills for that. And once I walked in, I was, like how you said, skeptical, because like most of these people that work there, they're your rival gang members. And it's crazy because in the street, once you see each other, it's pretty much just pure violence. And to see everybody like coexist, like if they were brother and sisters, was an amazing sight. That was the first time I really saw what love and like love could do to one another, how much you could change. So if it's possible for them to change, then it's possible for me to change too. I just needed the right tools and the right guidance to be able to get there. So right now, it's been a hard year for me due to COVID. I had my father-in-law that had passed away. After my father-in-law passed away, 30 days later, my best friend was killed. So during that time, it's really difficult. We have a beautiful support structure at Homeboys. I remember when all this was going on, and it was around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, around roughly that time, I could call my navigator and be like, this is what I'm going through. And they were there for you. They told me that I didn't have to relapse no more, because most of my time, anytime I had a problem or anything I had that would overstress me, the first thing would be to use. Because we want to numb the pain. You don't want to feel the pain. The easiest way you could do is by picking up something to drink, getting whatever substance that you use to numb the pain away. And we have a nice structure that helps me not be able to relapse again. And it's very important for us, because those are the tools that we need to be able to succeed. And thanks to them, I'm still here. I haven't relapsed. I'm not back in prison. And I'm continuing my educational goal. I'm in my second year to getting ready to transfer. I'm majoring in accounting. So hopefully everything goes pretty good for me, and I'm able to transfer. And I just want to give you thanks for letting me share a little bit about myself. And here's Father Greg.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be here with you. It's great traveling with Yarin and Frank. Thank you for your compañía. The day won't ever come when I have more courage, or I am more noble, or I'm closer to God than you two guys. So there's a kind of a vision that sort of joins us together in this beautiful place. And it's wanting the world to look differently than it currently looks. And so we want to imagine a circle of compassion, and then we want to imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And to that end, we want to go from Sacred Heart University to dismantle the barriers that exclude. What Martin Luther King says about church could well be said of your time here at SHU. It's not the place you come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to stand at the margins, which is the only way that they'll ever get erased. And so you stand there with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, and you stand with those whose dignity has been denied and those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And you get to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. And what a privilege it is to be able to stand at the margins with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And the goal, of course, is to create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it. And I suspect if kinship was our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice, we'd be celebrating it. And you go to the margins and you have to brace yourself because people will accuse you of wasting your time. But the prophet Jeremiah tells us, "For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." So the homies have taught me everything of value, in the last 37 years that I've worked with homies, and they've taught me how to text, which I'm really grateful for because I find it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people, and I'm pretty, good at it, LOL and OMG, and the homies taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for "oh hell no," which I've been using quite a bit lately, and I'm sure I'm not alone in being vexed by autocorrect, So I had a homegirl on a Sunday. Her name is Bertha. She's kind of a tough cookie, and she says, "Where you at?" And I said, "Well, I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas." And monjas is sisters, nuns in Spanish. I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas, and I pushed send. And autocorrect told her that I was about to speak to a room full of ninjas, which she thought was really darn interesting. And even on the road, we've been on the road since Sunday, and homies are always, how I'm going to pay my light bill and my car note and my rent. And a homie sent me, all I need is $100. Well, I didn't have it, so I texted him back simply, "Things are tight." And I pushed send, and it told him, "Thongs are tight." And he wrote me back, "Sorry to hear that." Like, what about my rent? It's not just, autocorrect that mangles things up, and somehow we find our way to something brighter and more spacious. And in the end, it's our notion of God that kind of breaks this thing wide open. Everything is utterly dependent. It is totally consequential what your notion of God is. If it's tiny, you'll be tiny. If it's expansive, you'll be that way. Meister Eckhart, a mystic who lived a long time ago, said, "It is a lie, any talk of God that doesn't comfort you." So we need to kind of locate the God who loves us without measure and without regret. Otherwise, it won't make any sense to go to the margins. You receive the tenderness of God, and then you become that tenderness in the world, which is kind of how it works. I buried my mom a handful of years ago, and she was 92 years old, and she had 8 kids, and I buried my father 25 years ago, and she died the way people would want to, in your own home, in your own bed, surrounded by your kids. It was perfect. And she wasn't a lick afraid of dying. In fact, she said to me 3 weeks before she died, she said, "I've never done this before," which was something you say just before skydiving, and she was, she had all her wits about her. In fact, at the end of her life, she was watching so much MSNBC, she was becoming Rachel Maddow, and she was sharp. And I remember that the day before she died, I was sitting by her bed, which never happened to her, would just be one of us, and it was just me. And she was asleep, and she opened her eyes, and she saw me at the end of the bed, and she said, "Oh, for crying out loud." And she went back to sleep. Well, she was pissed off that she hadn't died, and sorry. But the next day, as luck would have it again, I was there around lunchtime, and some of my sisters went out to get food, and at exactly noon, she opened her eyes, and she let out this wondrous, glorious gasp. Skydiving. And she left us, and nobody in earshot of that sound would ever be afraid of death again. But when I buried her, I remembered that she did this thing that when my 2 or 3 or 4 or all 8 of her kids were around her bed, she'd be in and out of consciousness towards the end there. And when she woke up, she'd look at us, and she'd just take you in with her vision, and she'd say with utter delight, "You're here. You're here." And I remembered that, and I thought, it's important what images we have of God, because they guide the ship. The God who can't take his eyes off of you, who looks at you and says, "You're here. You're here." And the Buddhists talk about, "Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are." We're meant to see each other and connect. I can remember I was at a San Fernando Juvenile Hall, and it was like 500 gang members in this thing, and I was vested. I had my alb on and my stole, and we had these sheets. Remember these sheets that had English and Spanish, where you would, during the Mass, had the readings. And so a homie came up after another, and I was sitting in my little chair, and I closed my eyes, and I rested the sheet on my lap, and I just wanted to hear the word proclaimed. And first homie got up and did the Old Testament reading, and then the second homie got up to do the responsorial psalm, and there was a kind of overabundance of confidence in his voice. And he gets up and he says, "The Lord is exhausted." And I look, what the hell? And I look at the sheet, and it was, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. when we create God in our own image, well, God is exalted. But it's way better to think of an exhausted God who is extensive and expansive and spacious and just can't take his eyes off of you. We receive the tender glance, and then we choose to be that tender glance in the world. It's what we're called to do. So Homeboy was started in 1988 when I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city, Dolores Mission. It had the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988, and on Saturday I'll bury my 251st, a young man named Isaiah. So the first thing we did was we started a school because there were so many middle school, junior high age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them, and so they were wreaking havoc in the projects. They were writing on the walls, selling drugs. They were violent. So I walked out to them, and I would kind of isolate them, and I'd go, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, every single one said, yeah, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand. And, right across the street from the church was our elementary school, grades K to 8, occupying the first 2 floors. But the entire 3rd floor was the convent, where the ninjas lived. And so I gathered all the nuns together one evening in the living room. I sat them down and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out? And we could turn the convent into a school for gang members. And they looked at each other and they went, sure. And that was the entirety of their discernment process. And so then we were off and running. Gang members came in large numbers to the school, and which created something of a disconnect. The church people would sidle up to me and say, hey, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out? And I thought that was a good gospel challenge. And then they said if only we had jobs, and so we started a kind of a jobs program. We marched around the factories trying to find felony-friendly employers. And then, long story short, we started to businesses because we couldn't find enough employers willing to hire folks. And so we started Homeboy Bakery and then Homeboy Tortillas, and then we changed our name from Jobs for Our Future to Homeboy Industries. And not every business worked. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. But now nobody ever intends to do such a thing, but we backed our way into becoming, we evolved our way into becoming now the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. So 15,000 folks walk through our doors wanting to reimagine their lives every year. The centerpiece is our 18-month training program, and so it's really about healing in community, as Frank and Yarin testified to. Every gang member who comes through our doors comes with what psychologists would call a disorganized attachment. Mom was either frightened or frightening, and you can't calm yourself down if you've never been soothed. Every single gang member walks through our doors barricaded behind a wall of shame and disgrace, and the only thing that can scale that wall is tenderness. If love is the answer, community is the context, but tenderness is the methodology. It's the only way to make love connective tissue. Otherwise, love stays in your head or in the ether or in your heart even. But unless it becomes connective and tender, it doesn't join And the idea is to create the community of beloved belonging. The great John Lewis said that we all live in the same house. And he doesn't make it aspirational. He doesn't say one day we may all live in. No, he says we live in the same house. That's who we are. And seeing people is kind of essential. The homies at Homeboy often say, you know, we're used to being watched, we're not used to being seen. The Christmas carol says, long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. And yet it's about Jesus, and yet it's about Christmas. But how is it not the job description of everybody here at SHU? You appear and the soul feels its worth. Exactly right. Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. At Homeboy, we're kind of allergic to the notion of holding the bar up and asking folks to measure up. Instead, we hold the mirror up and we tell people the truth, that they're exactly what God had in mind when God made them. And then you watch them become that truth, you watch them inhabit that truth, and no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out, and death can't touch it because it's huge. But at Homeboy, we know that you have to reach in and dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that keep people from seeing their truth. All of us share the same truth, our true selves in loving. How do you get to that? How do you dismantle what keeps you from seeing it? In the Acts of the Apostles, it says plainly and oddly, and awe came upon everybody. And it suggests that the measure of health in any community at all, including this one here, may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. Some years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia, at what they call a gang in-service. So the social workers commandeer a hotel ballroom, and they get credits, and you have to sign in, and it's 9 to 5, and it's keynotes and breakout sessions and workshops, and I'd done many of these, and so figuring I was going to do a keynote, and so I said sure, and I bought my ticket. Well, a week before I was to fly, I pulled the original letter out that it invited me, and to my horror, I discovered that I was to be the only speaker all damn day, 9 to 5. And I said to myself, oh, hell no, I'm not going to be the only speaker. So I called in 2 homies who were trainees at the time, and it's an 18-month training program. They were in like their 9th month, Andre and Jose, and I sit them down in my office. I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I had never heard them speak before, and Jose got up first, and he was like 25 years old at the time, and been to prison, tattooed. At that juncture in his 18 months, he was like in the 9th month, and he was had become a very valued member of the substance abuse team, a man solid in his own recovery, and now he's helping younger homies and homegirls with their addiction issues. And so not only had he been to prison, he had a long stretch as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers, and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when my mom looked at me and said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasped. And he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. he said, Well, honest to God, I've never seen this. We got whiplash going from gasp to laugh. And then he continued, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California. And she walks me up to an orphanage, and she knocks on the door, and the guy comes to the door, and she says, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me, and my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine, and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school every day. First t-shirt because the blood would seep through. Second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is this: if we don't welcome our own wounds, we may well be tempted to despise the wounded. Jesus wants us to go to the margins to stand with the widow, orphan, and stranger, because Jesus thinks these are the folks who know what it's like to have been cut off. And because they have suffered this particular pain, our God thinks these happen to be the folks most likely to guide the rest of us to the kinship of God. We're lucky because we want to take seriously what Jesus took seriously, and he only took 4 things seriously. They're big, but they're only 4. Inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. You go from Shu to take seriously what Jesus took seriously. And you try to be the tenderness of God in the world, where you are fluent in a mystical, therapeutic connection with people, where you speak the whole language and you love people into their own wholeness. I was at one of those mega Christian churches once. I don't know how I got invited to preach there, but it was 10,000 people with those mega, screens behind you. People could see how bald I was, and afterwards, a woman came up to me and she said, you know, your stories are all well and good. So I knew at that point I was in trouble. And she said, the only thing that matters is, do you bring gang members to Christ? And I said, well, no. They bring me to Christ. And then she got a little bit even more annoyed with me, and she said, the only thing that matters is this: how much time each day at Homeboy Industries do you spend praising God? And I said, all damn day. And I don't think she liked that answer very much. But it begs the question, what kind of praise does our exhausted God have any interest in? So years ago, I was invited to go to my alma mater, Gonzaga University in Spokane, where, like many of you in this chapel, their students were forced to read my book against their will or attend a talk like tonight. And so I knew I should go, you know, and they said, bring 2 homies with you. So I picked Trayvon and Mario. And though Yarin has never been on a plane before, you were calm as a cucumber. But I've done this a million times, I've never picked anyone who turned out to be so absolutely paniqueado and terrified of flying than Mario. Oh my God, it was starting to get me kind of freaked out. You know, he was hyperventilating, you know, like that, you know, and we hadn't even, you know, boarded the plane yet. So we were at Burbank Airport, which is kind of a small airport, and you don't go through that hermetically sealed chute to board the plane. You walk out into the tarmac like you're the president, and you climb up the steps to board the front of the plane, Southwest Airlines, big planes, and then, or the back of the plane. And he's just completely terrified, and I'm trying to calm him down, and I see our flight crew is arriving, and there are 2 flight attendants, females, both of them with very large cups of Starbucks coffee. It was very early in the morning, and they're schlepping up the steps to go board the plane. And Mario goes, when are we going to board the plane? I said, well, as soon as they sober up the pilots. There they go now. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. So I was walking at one point. I thought, well, let me walk him around the airport. So we're walking around, and I'm noticing that it's the parting of the Red Sea. You know, people are, oh my God, and people are moving away, and people are clutching their kids more closely. And you know, nobody in the history of our 33 years at Homeboy is more tattooed than Mario. All sleeved out, neck blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered in tattoos, forehead, cheeks, everywhere. And yet, you know, you guys know Mario, so if you asked anybody who was the kindest, most gentle soul at Homeboy, they'd say Mario. He is the tenderness of God, though the packaging might suggest otherwise. So we get to Gonzaga, and the big talk is Tuesday night, where all these students are forced to attend an evening talk. This may sound familiar to you. And they had all these other talks all during the day, and thank you for not doing that to us. You know, but it was like classroom, 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 classroom. And I thought, look, you guys talk. I'm going to yak tonight. Oh, and they got up and told their stories, and stories of torture and terror, and honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance, otherwise you'd get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. So we get to the big thing, and it's like 1,000 people, and I push them up there like I did Yarin and Frank to tell a little bit of their story so that I could include them in the question and answer afterwards, which I hope to get to. And So I do my talk, and they're standing, and I call them up here. Yes, ma'am. And a woman says, yeah, I have a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gate. And Mario is a tall drink of water, very skinny and very nervous, and he's terrified. He clutches the microphone. Yes. And she goes, well, Mario, you say you're a father and you have a son and a daughter who are about to enter their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? You know, what advice do you give them? Mario closes his eyes and he's just clutching the microphone. He's just terrified and he's starting to tremble and he's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with an answer. And suddenly he blurts out, As soon as he says those two words, he rushes back to his little refuge, microphone-clutching place. And now I know he's losing the battle with his tears, but he wants to get the whole sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence. Until the woman who asked the question, it's her turn to cry, and she stood and she said, why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving, you are kind, you are gentle, you are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 perfect total strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping. And all Mario can do is hold his face in his hands that this room full of strangers had returned him to himself. They, in turn, had been returned to themselves. Suddenly, kinship. And I think that's the only praise our exhausted God has any interest in. You go to the margins and you don't watch, you see. Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. You go to the margins and you look people in the eye and you say, you're here, you're here. And you receive the tender glance, and you choose to be the tender glance in the world. And don't think for a second that Sacred Heart University is the place you've come to. It was always going to be the place you go from. And you go from here to create a community of kinship such that God might recognize it, and pretty soon you cease to care if anyone accuses you of wasting your time. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. Thank you very much. I got this. Yeah, take your masks off. I'll do this. Yeah, I got it. I'll do it for 7 minutes, but I'll just have them yell it out. We got it. No, I'll do questions, but you don't need microphones. It takes too long. Yeah, so it's a small room, smaller, and then all the mandatory mandates are leaving. So here, and we only got 7 minutes, so it'll take too long to even figure out the microphone. Oh, you got a microphone there? But just holler out your question, and I'll repeat it if you're meek and mild. And I'll direct it to one of these two guys or not. We only have time for 2. There you go, ma'am. Go ahead. How do I decide which homies to bring with me? So sometimes homies, sometimes homegirls. I kind of mix and match. I always try to get somebody who's never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing gang members panic in the sky. Sometimes sometimes I go out of my way to pick enemies or mix races or I don't know. A lot of times it's kind of beyond my control because, you know, I have had this happen a billion times where it's parole and they wait to the last minute. Let me see, I'm going to have to go to my supervisor. Come on, I got to buy a ticket. And so it's been disasters. We got permission from you, but a lot of times, you know, they're kind of okay. I mean, why wouldn't you be okay, you know? Like I have a DC trip coming up where I think we might actually be able to get into the White House. And so it's like, well, I'll have to discuss it. A parolee is going with me and another guy. We're going to give several talks, Boston and DC, and he probably will get into the White House. How does a parole officer not think, oh my God, yes, absolutely, yeah, don't even worry about it? Because it's, I don't know. That's a good thing. Don't you want a good thing to happen? You know, that's so traumatic to me. I heard it earlier today, because that is the sound that wakes my ass up in the morning, and right away I'm, oh my God. Really, it's Pavlov's wake-up cell phone. Okay, holler out, anybody, yeah. Yes? Yeah, what's it like to tell your story in front of these folks? Give it a try.
To me, it's very wonderful. It's because it's something that's really personal to me, which also carries a lot of wounds that I'm still dealing with. So it's something that I could say that it's also helps me because I'm also going back and seeing how far I came with these wounds and how maybe like seeing my past and maybe it could help someone else and if they're going through something similar to that. So it's good. It's good. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I didn't give it a shot. What's it feel like?
For me, it's kind of, I still have a hard time with it because everything's still like fresh, like all the changes that are happening in my life, they're happening very quick. So it's kind of hard to like, damn, am I really doing this? Am I really in Connecticut right now? Like, am I dreaming? So, yeah, like, it's just, I get emotional a little bit when I talk about it because it's still pretty fresh, what I go through, what I've been going through, and I'm barely making the change. Like, I came to Homeways in April, and it's October, so it's a very short time, and I'm talking about years of trauma and all this stuff, you know, all this violence. So it's pretty like, it's nerve-wracking to talk about it, yeah.
Thank you. How about... So how about one last question, and I'll sign books out there, and then we're going to head home. I saw a hand. That was a brave there.
Yeah, so I'm in a leadership position. I work for an organization, and I'm just curious. I see your leadership position, but primarily you don't have very good also. What do you see in a good leader?
What do I see in a group leader? In a good leader? Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think part of the thing is, I was talking earlier with that great group of folks in the pizza party, that, you know, we get stuck. You know, we're settlers. You know, we settle for a partial God instead of holding out for the God we actually have. We settle for moral outrage rather than holding out for moral compass. We settle for pointing things out rather than hold out for pointing the way. leaders point the way. Leaders have a moral compass. And leaders try to imagine something. The poet Wallace Stevens says, "We live in the description of the place and not the place itself." And so the trick is, at Homeboy, we do what we do, and there's a culture there that is cherishing. If it's true that a traumatized person may be more likely to cause trauma, it's equally true that a cherished person will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and in cherishing others. And these are two good examples of that. So Homeboy does what it does, but in the process, we want to be the front porch of the house everybody wants to live in, a place of tenderness and care, where we believe two things are absolutely true, that everyone is unshakably good, everyone, no exceptions, and we belong to each other, everyone, no exceptions. And so where you start is where you end up, and good leaders want to see what's around the corner. And none of us will live forever, but all of us can live in the forever. And so we're invited to sort of live eternity right now with each other, and the best leaders can see it. And so in the end, you go to the margins so that you can see and know and love the folks there. A homie asked me once in Houston, who worked with gang members, he said, how do you reach them? I said, well, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? And in the end, you know, a good leader goes to the margins, and it's exquisitely mutual. And it is never about him, it's about us. And Shu is not the place you come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to point the way. And thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to go try and walk.
So on behalf of all of us, Father Greg, Frank, Yarin, thank you so much. 2014, Barack Obama said about Father Greg that he is a champion for change. And Greg, you have made a difference. And here at SHU, we want to say you are a champion for compassion. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. And to our visitors, thanks for being with us tonight, and enjoy the refreshments afterward.